Ukraine Crisis Media Center continues its work, and now I give the floor to Mr. Alexander Hook, Principal Deputy Chief Monitor of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine, with weekly updates from the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission. Mr. Hook, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Last week, the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine recorded 5,892 ceasefire violations. That brings the total so far this year to over 325,000 ceasefire violations. Almost 27,000 of those ceasefire violations were caused by proscribed weapons. Weapons that should have been withdrawn beyond lines agreed by the sides in Minsk a long time ago. And last week we observed 48 such weapons in violation, 31 in government-controlled areas and 17 in areas not controlled by the government. We have in fact so far this year seen over 3,800 heavy weapons in violation, over 2/3 in areas not controlled by the government. The sides refuse to fully implement the Minsk agreements. Instead of implementation, we see the sides going through the motions. There have been almost 70 sessions held in Minsk, 70 opportunities for the sides, 70 opportunities to iron out the differences to overcome remaining obstacles. Instead of overcoming obstacles, the sides have mostly created new ones. Instead of taking action, they argue over sequencing of actions. The process is stalled, and the violence continues as a result. And people, innocent civilians, continue to get killed or injured. The number of civilian casualties confirmed by the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission so far this year now stands at over 400. Dear friends, since the beginning of the year, the OSCE SMM has faced over 2,000 freedom of movement restrictions. Most were because of the presence of mines and unexploded ordnance that the sides, even though they have committed to removing them, have failed to remove. Almost 700 of these cases involved either soldiers or armed men, usually the latter, denying or delaying access. The problem is most persistent in areas not under government control, close to the unsecure international border with the Russian Federation. We have, for example, been denied access to Siedove, a town on the southern coast of Donetsk region, on 25th April. One armed so-called DPR member recently told us that Siedove was a closed village. Siedove, or anywhere else in Ukraine, is of course not closed. Maintaining that it is closed is a direct contravention of both the OSCE SMM mandate and the Minsk agreements. Denying access to the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission also contravenes the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2202, which endorses the Minsk package of measures of February 2015, which specifically calls for effective monitoring and verification by the OSCE SMM. Sometimes impediments to our monitoring come with violence or the threat of violence. Wednesday last week, on 25th of October, members of the so-called DPR in Verkhno-Shirokivske, also formerly known as Oktyabar, pointed a heavy machine gun at our unarmed civilian monitors. Restrictions and impediments on the OSCE SMM take many forms. The mission has, for instance, noted that the wooden ramps allowing SM monitors to cross the destroyed Stanica Luhanska bridge are in such poor state so as to pose a serious risk. The collapse of the fast decaying, poorly constructed ramps, which is assessed as likely, would also constitute a major impediment to the SMM monitoring. The nearest point at which the SMM can cross the contact line in Luhansk region is approximately 60 kilometers away in Zolote. The JCCC, which is tasked by the signatories of the Minsk agreements to assist in ensuring safe and secure access for the SMM, has failed to intervene to ensure the bridge is, or at the minimum the ramps crossing it, are repaired or replaced. We also had impediments on our technical monitoring, most recently with the so-called TPR refusing to give the necessary security guarantees to allow the installation of acoustic sensors near Shirokine. This week, another acoustic sensor in Popasna became operational, allowing the OSCE SMM to detect ceasefire violations, identify the direction from where they originate, and under certain circumstances pinpoint the origin of fire. Dear friends, it is not the OSCE who can stop this conflict. Only the sides can do this. But trust is so low between the sides, implementation is near impossible. No one is willing to move first for fear of losing advantage politically or militarily. A verification mechanism, which the OSCE SMM stands ready to provide, is clearly required. An independent body that will bring transparency to the process of weapons withdrawal and disengagement, an organization with monitors on the ground with experience in verification and monitoring of such processes. OSCE SMM monitoring can reassure the sides that the other side has adhered to its commitment. Weapons withdrawal and disengagement can take place in the confidence that the other side is similarly committed to adhering to their commitments. The OSCE can facilitate the sides if they want to end the violence. But first, they must allow us to do our job. First, they must allow us access, safe access. They must allow us unhindered safe access. They must stop threatening our monitors. They must conduct demining and ensure routes are open, including the one across the Stanica Luhanska bridge and others in areas close to the unsecure border with the Russian Federation. In addition, the sides must provide the OSCE SMM with inventories of heavy weapons currently in violation of withdrawal lines, the proposed routes along which they will withdraw them, and the specific areas that conform with agreed standards where they will park these weapons. Dear friends, now in its fourth year, it is sometimes hard to imagine this conflict will end. But it will end sooner or later. It will end when the sides stop squabbling, when they constructively engage, when they try to move the process forward, when they implement Minsk, when they withdraw weapons, disengage and demine, when they cease fire, when they finally decide they want peace. It will end above all when they decide it is time to end. But surely they realize that if and when they stop squabbling, if and when they come to their senses, if and when they accept their responsibilities, if and when they fulfill their obligation undertaken in Minsk, if they finally decide to choose peace, they will need a verification mechanism. They will need the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine. They need the OSCE SMM to verify compliance with the weapons withdrawal, disengagement, demining, ceasefire provisions of the Minsk agreements too. They need the trust that the OSCE SMM can provide. They must also realize that the OSCE SMM cannot function if its monitors are threatened and put in harm's way. Now it is ironic how they continue allowing their subordinates to threaten unarmed civilian monitors while at the same time calling for measures to protect the same unarmed civilian monitors. Dear friends, access, in particular safe access for the OSCE, is not up for negotiations. Given its importance to the resolution of this conflict, I think it is also unacceptable to the civilian population of eastern Ukraine. They, and in particular the friends and families of the victims, understand that peace can only be achieved by working together. A sustainable ceasefire is only possible if the sides move together, provided it has safe and unhindered access. The OSCE SMM stands ready to monitor and verify this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. Dear colleagues, if you have questions, you're welcome. The question will be in Ukrainian.
Запитання українською. Crimean Agency, and I have the following questions. Recently, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation said that it was reasonable to ensure escort of the OSCE SMM with the help of the UN peacekeepers, not only in the conflict area, but also in Lviv, Odessa, Kiev. And I have the following question. You have been working in Ukraine for over 3 years. Does the mission need such kind of protection from the UN peacekeepers in non-government controlled areas? How do you assess the security in other areas, not in the conflict zone?
Thank you. I'm not familiar with the statement that you refer to. And I can just reiterate that the biggest risks in areas where the conflict is active are mines and unexploded ordnance, as well as the risk of being caught in crossfire. The sides to the agreements in Minsk have agreed on measures to tackle these risks, and they have it in their hands to ensure that these risks are being mitigated through, including but not limited, mine action, as well as the withdrawal of heavy weapons and disengagement. Thank you.
So could you please clarify how do you assess the level of protection of your monitors in other areas, not in the conflict zone? The level of security in other areas, not those in the conflict zone, for the population and for your monitors.
Thank you. The participating states of the OSCE have mandated the mission to make observation with regard to the security situation in all of Ukraine. And the mission is doing that on a daily basis. All of its findings in this regard are made public in our daily report. We are not concluding on the basis of our findings. We are mandated to establish the facts, and those are visible every day, 6 times a week in Ukrainian, Russian, and English languages. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. Do we have more questions? No more questions for today. Thank you.